All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dunk on AP podcast. Today we are talking topic 6.5 of AP World, economic imperialism. So, to get started here, economic imperialism is a form of imperialism where a dominant country or entity exerts control or influence over the economy of a less powerful country without the need for political or military control, which is often achieved through monopolistic trade practices, investment, or lending, leading to economic dependency of the imperialized country. So this happens through resource exploitation. People, the labor force is crucial for labor intensive uh, resource cultivation or extraction. Raw materials. Cash crops replace subsistence agriculture, and mines get built for mineral extraction. Then refined goods. In some cases, goods were refined in colonial territories like opium processing in India for export to China. Poppies as an Indian cash crop. So the British East India Company began the process of creating cash crop farms for poppies in the Bengal region of India in the 1770s. Indian poppy farming replaced subsistence farming and required Indian labor for processing it into opium for export to China. So this becomes a big industry. In Britain's trade deficit with China, you see tea, porcelain, and silk going back to Britain, and then silver going back to China, and that comes out to a trade deficit for Britain. So opium was a solution to this trade deficit. Britain corrected it. The trade deficit with China by selling opium. This reversed the flow of silver. This led to widespread addiction in China and precipitated the opium war. So Britain is kind of like the casino, the expression the house always wins. Britain is going to find a way to fix if it is at a disadvantage in trade, it's going to find a way to fix that. So this is going to help lead to the opium war. So Lin Ju's destruction of confiscated opium in 1839 sparks a conflict. China enforces strict anti-opium trade measures and blockaded the Guangzhou. And in doing so, there's some failed negotiations. Britain seeks compensation in open trade. There's a clash between China's sovereignty and Britain's imperial ambitions, and this is going to lead to a war. So that is what leads to the First Opium War. Now, the outcomes of the First Opium War is British victory. It goes from 1839 to 1842, and that leads to the Treaty of Nanking. So the treaty forced China to open 5 ports to British trade. Hong Kong Island was ceded to Britain, starting British colonial presence in China. And also Britain gets most favored nation status granted to it, and this erodes China's trade sovereignty. Remember that China is not an imperial holding of Britain. It's just that Britain is pushing influence there. So then the Second Opium War. This was fought from 1856 to 1860, primarily involved Britain and France against China. It ended with Chinese defeat in harsher terms for China. It exposed further weaknesses, of course, in the Qing dynasty, which at this point is just falling apart like tinfoil. And it leads to increased opium trade, and foreign presence. This also marks the beginning of what China calls their century of humiliation. So the open door policy, to sort of buoying on this whole century of humiliation thing, European powers sought exclusive trade and legal rights within China's spheres of influence after the Opium Wars. So the U.S. proposed the open door policy in 1899 to ensure equal trade rights in China. The policy aimed to prevent China's further division, and it aimed to protect the U.S.'s economic interests in China, and in Asia more generally. While it did not end imperial competition, the policy does promote a multinational approach and mitigates direct colonial rule of China. Now, the port of Buenos Aires, this was financed by Barings Bank, a British firm. It was designed by a British engineer. It was finished in 1888. British involvement allowed them to dominate Argentina and Europe trade routes and reinforced Argentina's economic dependency on Britain. And so not only did the port of Buenos Aires facilitate the trade of meat to a rapidly urbanizing Britain, it also enabled the arrival of migrant workers from Europe, pictured if you look at the Google slides, there are Italian workers arriving at the port in Buenos Aires in 1907. So again, anytime that you have these imperial connections, you are going to see a steady stream of migration, one to the other. Now, bananas. So bananas were tasty, cheap, and profitable. Bananas were grown to feed railroad workers in Costa Rica, and profitability of bananas as an export to the U.S. gave rise to banana plantations in Central America. This leads to the rise of banana republics. Banana republics were politically unstable Latin American countries that relied heavily on a single export commodity, such as bananas, and were often subject to corrupt governance and foreign intervention. So the United Fruit Company is an infamous example of U.S. economic imperialism. Its dominance in Central America was supported by the U.S. government, which intervened diplomatically and militarily to protect the company's interest, often at the expense of local sovereignty and stability. So, a little bit more about economic imperialism in the Kingdom of Hawaii, because remember, I told you the U.S. really doesn't just go busting down people's doors generally and being all imperial, especially not in the 1800s. But what they will do is extend their economic imperial influence. So, American businessmen established a presence in Hawaii in the 1800s. In 1887, the Constitution of the Kingdom of Hawaii was drafted by Americans, and that stripped the monarchy of Hawaii of power, and they do sign it by the threat of force. And so the Queen of Hawaii attempted to reestablish the monarchy, but was overthrown by sugar and pineapple plantation owners, and Hawaii becomes a U.S. territory in 1900. And then the last thing that we'll talk about, again, whenever there's these imperial moves, there's going to be migration, Japanese immigration to Hawaii. Post U.S. annexation, plantations in Hawaii had a high demand for laborers. Japanese immigrants were actively recruited to fill this role, and a number of factors made the Japanese ideal target for finding laborers. So that's all for this one. This is a shorter lesson. I hope you guys have a good one. See you later.